will be very valuable to many people. I would love to get started on you just sharing how you got into the natural product industry, because I don't even know if I know this answer. I've known you for 12-ish years now. We met when I acquired Scarlet
Yeah.
Sage, and you were one of the reps. You were Evan Healy rep, and I believe you were repping Gaia at that time. But I'm just curious to hear your origin story for everyone here.
Well, I sort of grew up in the industry. I had family where I grew up that ran a natural products co-op. And so before I even really knew what it was, I was like a kid running around a co-op and learning about brands and stuff. And that was where I grew up in Florida. And then I visited California once. I visited San Francisco once and decided I had to live here and relocated and sort of through familial connections landed in a health food store as my first job when I first landed in Sausalito. Like randomly landed in Sausalito, which happened to be like one of the most dreamy places in the world. It was just like where I found an apartment. And so because I had family ties to the natural industry that I didn't even really get or understand, I got connected to a health food store where I was able to start working in a natural food store in Sausalito, the old Real Foods company chain,
Oh, I
one
know
of the
Real
original,
Foods.
yeah, one of the original chains in the state of natural products, I think, but definitely the Bay Area. And so I started just working in a natural food store in my early 20s. And then from there, I got my first rep job. I always worked in the wellness department. I might have lied on that application and said that I had worked in wellness
Yep,
before.
yep, yep.
um, and then I became a rep for Flora, actually. I think when I first met you, I was the Flora rep.
Oh, I remember that. Flora. And can
Yeah.
you explain Flora for those people here who don't know all the brands?
So Flora is the North American company that distributes the product Floradix Iron and Herbs, which is a really old school midwife iron supplement. They also work with Udo to make Udo's oil and Udo's probiotics, and they also distribute the Reen Case Essiac Herbs formula fluorescence.
That's a
So
great
those are
one.
kind of their main claims. And they were my first outside sales rep job that I ever worked with. And I learned so much with them. I was a direct rep for them and I covered like half of the state of California. And so I was just like a road dog on the road all week, just driving and getting to as many stores as I possibly could. But it was good at that time in my life, pre-kids, because it was such a good learning experience. I got to see every kind of store, key accounts, independents, and really just learn from that way after working inside of a small independent natural food store and then going and working with all various types of accounts. And then from there, I became a broker. Or no, actually, from there, I went and I worked for national key accounts for Flora. I moved up to their home office in Bellingham, and then I managed national key accounts. And that's when I started to have babies and couldn't be traveling all over the country like that anymore. And I really wanted to go back to working in Northern California because culturally it's where I align the most. I've never been a really pushy salesperson. I've always just been a lifestyle person and like this is my life and I believe in these products and I feed them to my children and this is why I believe in them. And I align most with the customer base of Northern California. So I always just strive to get back to Northern California and I grew a brokerage here, which that means that I work for multiple brands at that point instead of just one. And then all of the changes in the world of the 2020s era. I hate referring to it as the COVID times, but that posed an incredible change in our industry. The supply chain, I got really tapped into the global supply chain during that. And I had these stores that I had worked with for 10 years that were like, we can't get products. And what do we do? And find us more products, please. And so I was actually asked by multiple store chains to start a distribution during that time because there were independent brands that couldn't afford and do what it was needed to be in the major distributions. And then there were stores that also wanted different brands that were in the distributions and they wanted to carry what I've always referred to as human owned brands. And I've always really prided myself in focusing on supporting human-owned brands, because that's kind of what our industry was founded on and what makes our industry important, and why it's been successful for so long is the visionaries who create amazing products that affect people's lives in positive ways. So I started distributing and I actually started importing from countries that had access to the packaging, like sustainable packaging that was needed at that time, like New Zealand. So I imported New Zealand brands the most during COVID so that I could distribute them regionally in Northern California. And I really wanted to be like a regional distributor and really just support Northern California, um, and all of the amazing independents we have here. And I did that for a while. And then I was also exporting. Um, and then, the obvious changes in this world that we live in now with import and export and all of the different challenges that came with that. I had to adjust again from that as well. That wasn't sustainable for me anymore either. And I struggled to compete with the bigger distributions. And so I morphed back into doing brokering and just carrying more brands and supporting stores again. But I've always just been rolling with the tides of the industry.
Amazing. You have. I know that for sure. You are a hard worker. I know that of you. Can you just, we're going to go backwards a little bit and define what a rep is. Can you explain what a rep does from your point of view? And then we'll talk about what the difference between independents and national accounts as well.
Yeah. So when I mentioned working for Flora, I was a direct rep. So that means that I was an employee of the company and I worked only for that company. That company then pays for more things. They pay for a travel stipend. It's a whole health, like it's a health insurance benefit. I'm a normal employee. I work remotely. Sometimes it's required to go to the office for like the home office, which is obvious. It's usually in another state because reps will work in every territory throughout the country. Um, it's not, it's in that time, like that was like the 2010 time, it was normal. Like that was the status quo for having representation for your brand was having direct reps that were employees. It's no longer the standard.
Mhm.
Um, so what a rep does is handles all of the business. It's my job as a rep to understand the region that I'm responsible for, to maintain all of the contacts of all of the buyers in the stores, and to know the nuances of how that store operates, to understand the culture, the values, the needs, the customer base of each individual account, and then completely manage the customer service aspect of managing the store. So account, new product presentation, new brand presentation, sales and marketing plans, checking, like maintaining store sales and being responsible for the sell-through of products at a store level, educating the store staff, like events, regional marketing, anything like that. You're the expert of your region as a sales rep. And not much of that changes if you use the word broker, like as far as the duties and the responsibilities. Um, the thing about a broker is you're not a direct employee, so there's no like travel stipend, no health insurance, but that means that as a broker, I can contract with multiple brands. So I'm not just working for your brand.
Yeah. And when we met, you were a direct employee of Flora, and then you started contracting with multiple brands after that and
Yes.
started a brokerage. And brokerage is you get a percentage of sales for that's how you get paid is based on
Commission.
sales in those ideally in
Mhm.
those stores. And therefore any sales that we had, you get that are coming directly through you, you get a portion of those sales. And that's how brokerage works. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. And then I remember your Evan Healy. You were so active with Evan Healy. So for those of you who don't know Evan Healy is a natural, semi-luxury, not quite luxury skincare brand that is one of the first B Corp and regenerative agriculture skincare brands, very oil-based. Their branding is the skin breathes, which I love. And you helped develop, this is where some reps are really amazing. Shayna, you're one of the best reps I've ever seen. Truly. You had a whole day where people had facials and estheticians were there and gave away free product. And we had this whole day booked out Scarlet Sage just for Evan Healy, and everyone tried the product, touched the product. We booked facials. It was amazing. And you, as a rep, were the one who actually managed that entire creation as well as um, the specific actions and operations of that event. So, a big part of what reps do is how do we sell? How do we activate? How do we get this brand in front of a lot of people, which is really sales.
Yeah.
You're an excellent salesperson.
But that's more experiential, you know. I feel like for Gaia and Evan Healy, when I was doing that, those companies were very supportive of the unique ways I wanted to approach sales. And that was amazing. That was so fun for me because instead of just going in and saying, like, well, here's why you should buy this serum, I could just take customers to an organic farm and give them facials in the trees and explain what a holistic facial was and why it was like that. Um, so working with Evan Healy while they were developing their holistic esthetician program was like a highlight of my career. It was so fun because they are a company that truly values the experience for the customer and getting to make people feel why the product is special and why it's important. And just like they were like, we don't need to tell you anything, we'll just show you. And so whether we did that as a far like a minor demo or a larger scale, I mean, we had multiple events at the Scarlet Sage. We brought in like a professor from Berkeley to have a soil science and skin science event.
Mhm.
But all of them included mini facials with our holistic estheticians. And it was like, you know, people would leave any kind of demo we did like that just feeling beautiful and glowy, and they could see a difference. And it was like way more fun than just like, you know, showing them a document that says, this is why this is good. So I had been doing it for a long time, and we had done tons of trainings at lunch, eating like chicken in a room, looking at a prompter. And that's not the vibe of really like brands that are developed by these visionaries that like really value like land stewardship and things like that. Um, so it was like, how do we do storytelling in the most experiential way and something that really leaves an impact? And those events left an impact. We would hear about them for years afterwards.
Oh yeah, I think there's some of the best events that I remember for any brand, any activation for any brand that we sold, and we sold over 300 brands.
Yeah.
So Evan Healy as one of the as you were there supporting Evan Healy, it gave me a lot of inspiration for our Scarlet Sage brand, which
Mhm.
was how do we get people to touch this, feel this, smell this, drink this tea, and experience it because once they experience it, you know they want more of it because it's
Yeah.
so wonderful. It smells so good or it tastes so good or whatever that is. And I think that's why I'm really excited for you to be in here with some of our entrepreneurs, early entrepreneurs, of giving kind of burgeoning some ideas for folks that are at the beginning stage of how do I get this out in the world and how do I get people to experience the amazingness that I am or I'm creating. Can you explain, because we're going to go deep into how a product gets into a store. That's a really important piece for a lot of the stages that people are in with this group. But can you explain the difference between an independent and a national chain from the experience of a product?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just on the basic level, obviously, an independent is an individually owned store. It's not owned by a corporation. It's owned by people who, in our industry, like we're so lucky that the people that we get to work with will start natural food stores not because they want to be millionaires, but because they want to support the community that they're in, and they care about their customers and they care about people being healthy and also they care about the world and what impact brands can have on the world. And so often our independents will have standards and values of the kind of products that they will carry. versus national brands will use, or national accounts or key accounts will often be like a tiny chunk of that they've then tried to make bigger, and they have to appeal to a much larger customer base. So it's not like saying like necessarily like one's good and one's bad, but it's just that a store that's going to have 400 doors throughout the country has to appeal to that whole country. And they have to have other products there that people just are used to buying and are comfortable buying and that sell based on data versus a store like an independent that might only carry brands that they align with as far as values and things like that, or what's available to them locally.
Amazing. Another piece too that actually took me a while to realize this was very true is that national brands that say Target, Safeway, you know, these brands, you'll have to pay to get on their shelf the majority of time versus independents. You don't generally have to pay. They're very picky. They don't ask you to put, sometimes it costs $10,000 for you to put a product on a shelf at a co-op, like a national co-op or New Seasons up in the Pacific Northwest, for example. My friend just got her granola in there, and I believe it was a $15,000 shelf cost for 6 stores to get it on their shelf. And then you have to pay for marketing, you have to pay for these things. These things, you know, I did not know that actually after, I think it took me 6 years of after acquiring Scarlet Sage to realize I can charge people for my shelf space. This is amazing. That would have been amazing for me to know. And do I want to charge people for my shelf space? There's this big question. So for early brands, it's actually really smart to go to the tiny shops because you might not have to pay anything to get in there.
Well, yes, I had a meeting this morning with a brand that I do consulting with where I just had to go over a document of the New Leaf and Lazy Acres laws of how to
Yeah.
be a new brand there because it was really hard to digest of how much it was going to cost.
Okay.
Um, so that is a real thing. There are things called slotting fees in the major national brands, and when you get 400 doors with an opening order, it's going to cost you money. Um, and that is a fact. A lot of them have slotting fees, which is just simply the shelf space. Then there are yearly requirements for what you need to contribute for what's called co-op ad dollars. Um, so if you're going to have a little line on their flyer of all the sales and you're going to be one of the things that costs money. Um, Most stores also simply just charge if you're going to give them a TPR, like a temporary price reduction. You're going to go on sale for the month. They charge you for that because that internally requires POS work for them. They have to print tags. They have to pay people to put the tags up. So I really believe I have worked as a national key account manager. I have managed every national key account in the country. I have also worked with regional chains. And um, our job, the people who have these conversations, is to negotiate these terms. And so the company, the national brand, will have this press kit that comes out where it says it's going to be $15,000 or it's going to be this, and this is what these basics cost. It's their job to negotiate just as much as just my job to negotiate. So I like to make sure when I'm talking to a founder and someone who's coming into this space is to never feel out of control and that have the right people representing you because that is the name of this game. There is a set standard, but then there is also every company is just putting that out there. And if your brand is worthy of being in that store and should be in that store, we will find a way to get through the hurdles of the things that don't seem attainable and the fees that don't seem doable at this stage in your business. And there are still tons of opportunities with regional chains and even national chains to get past those hurdles based on the who of your business, what you're actually selling, and those kinds of things. So that's a lot of what I do is represent brands and go and have those hard conversations about, if we pay this, you have to give us this, or just negotiating the terms of what's possible.
I love that so much. Thank
Yeah.
you for the work you do for those brands. Because not every brand has that business model to go and expand across the country. And yet,
Hmm.
We're interviewing Lauren Haynes from Wooden Spoon Herbs 2 weeks ago, and she got into the National Whole Foods and had to scramble quickly on one, filling that order, two, raising the money to fill that order. And not a lot of people position themselves or plan for that transition. It sometimes just happens, or it happens they weren't prepared, they don't know what that actually looks like, what kind of cost that comes. But I think for those that want that, even a regional expansion, let's say Northern California or whatever state you're in, planning for that or having that awareness so it's not a shock, I think is really important here, especially for those that, like you said, really should be in that store because that's where their customer is and they feel really excited about that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Reps are really important. Now, question, I we're gonna kind of go into like your early independent sales days. When you look at a brand as a rep, as a broker, and you say, yes, what is it in that brand? And I know we're generalizing, but you can bring some specifics of any brands that come to mind. What is it in that brand that you are excited about? What excites you about packaging or about ingredients or about marketing? What excites you?
When when I'm reviewing a brand and determining if I should represent it or not, I don't just I'm not capable of just taking on any brand, even if it's just going to make me money. I have to believe in something and it has to make sense for my customers. So what I look for right away is just based on my experience and what I'm doing day to day in the stores is having conversations on the aisle, seeing what's missing on the shelf. Customers tell me what they want and what they're looking for and what they need. So if I see a brand that fills a void being something that should be on the shelf, but we can't find it anywhere and it's not out there. That's an immediate yes for me. I really, or if I see a brand that really aligns with the values of the stores that I represent the most, that's the ticket. Post COVID times, you really want to see a store that's had strong direct to consumer sales first before you bring it to retail, which is kind of a new thing. We used to just want to launch in retail. But if you can show strong direct to consumer sales and some presence on social media and things like that, then that makes it something that you know is going to sell in stores as well. People will be excited to see.
I agree. I started noticing that as soon as COVID happened, any new brands, we looked them up on social before we even said
Yeah.
yes to them, just to see what other people are interested in, even what their full line sheet could look like in real life, what it could potentially look like on our shelf. And it's social media, which I go through in this course, it's a proof point. It's like you exist and you're out in the world, existing in the world, and people are excited about you. You don't have to have 20,000 followers, but it's that you are out there and really showing up as something that's really fresh and really unique and really grounded and really interesting.
And it's free.
Yeah, free marketing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really good point. So, in your experience working in sales reps, I'm as a sales rep, I am actually curious to hear some examples of some what you think some brands have done really well, and then maybe some examples of some failures that might not have to be with you, but things that you can think about with certain brands.
I have actually seen, you know, so many different things over the years. I've seen a brand come out with like the most innovative formula that I've ever seen, and it's like so efficient. And I try the product and it works so well, and I can believe in it so much. But the packaging looks like it was made on like an MS-DOS like
Yep,
typewriter, and it just gets lost on the shelf. And so, uh, packaging, unfortunately, is of the
everything.
utmost importance.
Yeah,
And so you really have to do your research as far as what your specific product requires on the shelf. And certain products, even if they're in a glass bottle, have to be in a box or they won't be taken seriously.
right, right.
What does your like, does it fit into the set? Is the set nothing but like these beautiful watercolor boxes of products, and then yours is like chic and gray and beige and white, and then it gets completely lost? So you really have to do your research as to far as like where's your home on the shelf and what do your competitors look like, and then compete with that and come to the table with that. Um,
I love that.
Also, like, so what I've seen brands do really well is even the ones that might not have the most up to date or modern, or, and it's an investment to have designers make your packaging. Um, they just really know how to serve retailers. And so they're coming to the table with an understanding that promotion is necessary, that you have to take care of buyers, that you have to provide product sampling, you have to have the funds up front to do some ads and to do some demos and to really just know how to support. When I have a brand that really knows how to support retailers, it's a breath of fresh air for me because I don't have to come back once a month and have a conversation where my founder thinks that I'm, just giving them a hard time. And I'm like, hey, like, we have to credit this customer return. This is standard and they don't get it. Or they are reluctant to want to support something like that. Just the real understanding of what it takes to really serve retailers.
That's a really good point that you make because now that I'm reflecting on a lot of what you've just shared, thinking about the favorite brands that us as a staff would sell to people were the ones we got the best education for, the ones that were easiest to work with, the ones that a customer return, absolutely, you didn't like this or this wasn't the thing, then the brands, gave us the credit for that. We
Yeah.
sold more of those products. The easier the brand is to work with, the more generous they are with samples, especially staff samples, because all of our staff were herbalists, budding herbalists, so they just wanted to try everything. The better the brand did in
Yeah.
our store because we sold them. We were the salespeople. So it was really important for us to believe in it deeply.
It's like the words you use are right on because I always say when I'm talking to my brands and trying to tell them about what I do, my job is to make it easy for my stores to carry your brand. Because if they try to work directly with the people who created the products, it's very difficult.
It is.
And
Yeah.
the people working in retailers, more than ever, when you work in a store, you're dealing with really tumultuous things on a day-to-day basis. And so if it's difficult to order a product or to get service on a product, then you're probably not going to order it. So that's the base level job of what I do, what sales representatives should do, is to make it easy for their retailers to carry your product and filter the in between.
It's such a helpful piece, even as an independent store that I had to be able to have a rep that knew that product and that we could connect with that company if we needed education or any type of support
Mhm.
was massive. So important. Now, I remember this reminds me of Tim Ferriss. Okay. I bring up some very typical male entrepreneurs in here, so I need to find some better examples of women entrepreneurs, but one of his podcast I listened to a couple of years ago about him publishing his next book, he went into all the Barnes and Nobles and had different covers of his book and put them on the shelf. Like he actually just sat and just put it on whatever section it was going to sell in, and he watched who picked up what color, and that helped him decide. They weren't even for sale. They weren't
Yeah.
even the real book, right? He was just curious. But this is the type of work that is just as important as writing the book, is selling the book, is making sure the book is interesting. And that's the packaging conversation. And I would say, based on what you were sharing, if you do have a product and you want it in a natural food store, go to that natural food store, go to the section that you think it would be in, and put your color palettes next to the products and see if it stands out, see if it's interesting, see if it looks exactly the same. There was a reason why sometimes we didn't buy product that was actually really excellent product is because it never sold off of a shelf because packaging, sadly, communicates everything to the world that the customer needs just to get curious more than anything. And then they turn it around and then they look at the ingredients and then they say it works. But packaging is that first entry point and the branding is the first entry point. Sometimes it's a different bottle shape. Sometimes it's a different color. You say you can't hear me, Lacey? Is that what you're saying? Oh, you were scratching yourself. Okay. But it was a huge benefit when the product was also really good. But
Yeah.
it wasn't always the really good product that sold.
Yeah.
We had to sell the product. Actually, one of the best examples of this is the Mad Hippie. Remember the old Mad Hippie packaging that looked like it was from a 13-year-old girl drew it on the bottle? The way that I would sell it, because I loved the product, was that terrible packaging, great product. You know how many people laughed at that, but it was the best sales line ever? Because they
Yeah.
were like, right, don't look at the packaging, just look at the product. But I had to say that.
Hmm.
But now it has better packaging, and I'm like, now I can just say great product, even though I don't think the packaging is actually that great anymore. But finding a way to stand out, not just through ingredients, but through packaging, is the beautiful art of branding. Truly not an easy journey.
No, not easy at all.
Probably
And
the
that's why
hardest
companies
journey.
rebrand. That's why there's rebranding every 5 years or 3 years. You
That's
have
right.
to just listen to the feedback.
Yep. But I think it really matters on who's giving the feedback.
Yeah.
Not all feedback is good feedback,
No.
right? Not all
Yeah.
feedback is good feedback. Sometimes the quietest people are the best feedback because they're like, actually, because you're asking, I'm finally going to give you an honest answer. The only good feedback are the people that are constantly buying your product. They are
Yeah.
the ones who actually have an opinion that you should listen to versus people that don't buy your product but have an opinion about your product. I don't care about those people.
Right.
It
Exactly.
took me a long time to figure that one out,
Yeah. A lot
right?
of people just want to be heard.
Oh, yeah. And they have opinions about everything.
Yeah.
They have opinions about everything.
Exactly.
Unless, and this is my lesson, unless you're actually buying my product regularly and you still have an opinion, I am actually interested in listening because you're an actual customer who cares about me and my success and my well-being. And you
Yeah.
want it to stay on the shelf. You want it to continue.
Hmm.
You want this to be there. Yeah.
Luckily, in this area, we do not have a shortage of people that
Yeah.
aren't afraid to tell us what they think. I actually have a few stores that are stores that I bring products to before I'll take them on and go, tell me everything. And then that's how I know the questions to go back and ask the brand. I know what I'll need to know in order to be successful with the brand or to know about it. So
Good.
it's a good test market here.
Yeah. I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, people are well educated.
Yeah.
What do you would when you look at brands, what does retail ready mean to you exactly? What are the things that a company needs to have in order for you to even say that it's retail ready? Ready, whether you actually bring it on as one of your brands or not.
Yeah.
What are the essentials? We're going to get into brass tacks here.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is something that comes up often. One of my most recent brands that I started working with a few years ago, I saw them all over Instagram and I reached out like 3 times and I was just like, do you have packaging yet? Do you have barcodes yet? Like, I'm ready to take you to my stores whenever you're ready. And I had to reach out like 3 or 4 times and then eventually they were like, we got barcodes. And I was like, okay, I can help you with the rest. Let's go because I know that my stores need this product.
Right.
Um, so I'm familiar with this process, and being someone who's worked a lot with human-owned brands, I've always been really inspired by visionaries who create something that they're passionate about. I want to work with people like that. However, there are an incredible amount of things that it takes to be retail ready. So there's different stages of it. Step one is barcodes, item numbers. You have to understand that stores have a register and a cashier who doesn't care what product they're scanning. They're just there to scan products over and over, and you have to make your product accommodate. Even the smallest store has a POS system where they scan barcodes. Um, from there, you have to have things like lot numbers and expiration dates, depending on the type of product. These are all very basic things. So that's like your basics. Then, if you actually want to be successful and to see a return and to start to really expand your presence both in multiple retailers and within one retail store, you have to understand and be in the process of developing a sales and marketing plan. Who is going to present your products? Who is going to maintain the data that each store requires? There's paperwork for each store. It's not just like, do you want this? We'll put it on the shelf. you have to go through a whole process of different data because there's multiple departments in a store, like the receiving department, the category management department, the actual people who work on the floor with your products, the cashiers, and all of those departments have to communicate. So that's managed by data. And that's another thing that your sales rep should do, or however your key account manager should do, but they need all that information from you. So when I say a sales and marketing plan, it's, one of the first things I do with brands that I do consulting work with on this is like, let's do your line list. Do you have a wholesale order form that lists your product, the size, what type of bottle it's in, the count? Is it like what's the case pack? What's that cost? What's the SRP? What's the UPC code? What's the item number? Um, and you need to have that line list to start. And then from there, you need sell sheets.
Yep.
You need, which are like more of like a marketing thing. That first line sheet can be an Excel document that is literally just information. Then you want to make a pretty one that is, that sells who your brand is and allows a sales rep to use it to meet with an account, to leave it there as an informational support, but also to like educate and to actually present your products. So, I think very preliminarily, just a one pager, a sell sheet is great, but eventually you need a deck. You need like a whole presentation of who your brand is and what your brand is. Um, and you also need an understanding that there will be a negotiation of all of the different fees, even in independent accounts. It's not just national accounts where there are fees. Um, there are ways to work out swell agreements, what we refer to as swell agreements with stores, which is basically like, we'll give you 2% every day, and that's going to cover all of your customer returns. So we're not going to tell you when someone returns something, but you're just going to get a 2% off ongoing.
Can you pause for a second? So what you're saying is that instead of paying for my full price of my wholesale price, I'm going to give you a discount on that at 2%, but that should cover, you're making more money, your margins are larger on that. That should cover any returns, but we're not giving you a store credit for our returns.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay. Thank you.
So it's different ways to negotiate. Some stores require a swell agreement right off the top. They're like, just this is a swell agreement, even independents. Um, and that's kind of goes back to what I was saying before about like never feel out of control. Like there's tons of negotiation points for all of the fees and all of the different things that are going to come up, and there's different ways to approach them. Um, but just an understanding that we're going to have to run an ad, we're going to have a demo, we're going to have to educate. Like there's going to be an investment that is necessary. Um, so I think that is like sort of the fuller picture of retail ready is the understanding that like there is quite a bit of investment that's going to come with going to retail. It's not just a big return right off the bat.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for that. And I'll make sure some of these notes are given. We've talked about line sheets already as a group. Lauren mentioned line sheets last week. I know that's a big question for people, what a line sheet looks like. So I'll make sure some examples are given in the group. You talked about the investment. This is a huge piece, especially for people who have a small brand who are doing this on the side and wanting to see if they can make this a real business. Can you talk about some of the concerns or the mistakes that early founders make in not preparing for that financial investment to get into stores, and what kind of costs should they be considering when they're looking at pricing their product?
Right. So I'll adjust the pricing of the product first. So a mistake that I commonly see with a brand that I'll begin working with, and I will go over this with the founder prior to showing a store, is you want to, as much as possible, create space in your margin that accounts for shipping and handling. And then you also want to understand what it would take as far as a minimum order quantity to have a shipping minimum.
Great.
But that is a lot of visionaries and founders who make stuff that they feel is like good for people. They're like, I just want to price it at the best price and sell it for what's fair. And unfortunately, that does not translate in retail. Um, 10% off a product that you've increased the margin by 60% actually speaks to your consumer more than just having what you consider a fairly priced product.
That's a good point. I love that.
Um, People want to see a yellow sale tag versus like, well, that seems fair, the regular everyday price. um, so you have to build your margin out to account for TPRs, which is temporary price reduction, promotion, sales, your intro discount, paying people like me, commissions, your sales reps that you're going to need to service your accounts, and shipping and handling. So, whereas you might sell direct to consumer or you might sell at farmers markets and things like this and want to have like a just a competitive, like this is my bottom line price. When you go into retail, I would say it's about a 20% increase beyond that of what your margins should be. And you should understand too that retailers, regardless of what you think is fair, set their own margins. So all that you can really tell the customer is what your cost that you're giving them is. And most of them have 50% margins on their end.
Yes, absolutely.
So whatever cost you're giving them will be pretty much doubled for their cost that they do.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying this. I think this is the most common concern for any heart-based company is we want to serve the people, we want to sell the products that are as affordable as possible.
Mhm.
And I'm a big advocate, as you are as well, is that these products would not be possible if you're not making money. So having that margin, I love that 60% margin. I think that's a great way because we were been doing COGS around that 50% based on wholesale, but I love pushing at 60 to 70 and then looking at doubling that for MSRP is a perfect example of buffering your margins, making sure you're having this wiggle room that you're always accounting for these promotions. I know that when we had Herb Farm on promotion, this was 3 times a year, 20% off. We were their biggest count in the country because we had
Mhm.
almost every single tincture that they sold because
Mhm.
we're an herb store right in San Francisco. We would sell out all the time. And this is a $15 product. This is a cheap product already. It wasn't about the $15 product. It was about the 20% off that people bought 3 or 4 months in advance. That's all that it was. I mean, they saved $2,
Mhm.
maybe, $3, depending on the
But
tincture.
it just felt good. And
It feels good because at that point, it's like you are saving money if you're using this regularly. And so it is an important thing to think of if you have a $60 product on the shelf that's expensive but worth it. I like to call those, I buy $60 products that are expensive but worth it, and I cherish them. But if they're 20% off, for me, that's a really big deal because I already want it.
Mhm.
And for you, you've built in that price point already to imagine most of the time you sell it when it's on sale.
Yeah, and in my experience, it's never going to feel right for the founder to do that. And so that's why it's important to have people like Laura and like your consultants that you're working with, like let the people that handle numbers do that, and really step away. Because as a founder, those things are never going to feel natural to you. And it's not, that's okay, and you have to just have the people around you that you trust to handle those pillars of your business. I've always loved supporting visionaries and founders. I have no desire to create my own product. I
Yep.
don't. I don't. I love products. I use products. I think it's amazing. I like to go and play with them or like, I used to play at the Scarlet Sage in the back room, but like, I don't want to make my own product. I like to support visionaries who make their own product and have the difficult business conversations for them to make them successful. So accept it's never going to feel good, but that's why you have your team of people around you that handle this stuff. And that's really, really important.
Thank you for saying that. I truly don't believe that any founder is the right person to create their financials from the very beginning. And I agree with you on that.
Correct.
But I think they are once they start putting on the hat of selling the product, not creating the product, but selling the product. It's a different hat that they have to wear. And I remember being like, but people won't pay for it. And then I'm watching myself paying for the same type of product in a different store of a different brand for more money. And then I'm like, wait, I do this. I buy these things all the time. Why do I think that I'm not the customer? Why do I think that my customers are going to be different than me? And
It's
I
a
think Evan
vulnerable place
Healy,
to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think Evan Healy is a good example of that because they were one of the most expensive natural product brands from the kind of on the shelf outside of spa industry
Hmm.
on the natural product shelves, and we sold out of them all the time
Hmm.
because their brand communicated their values really well. And it was beautiful, clear packaging. It wasn't even that fancy packaging. It was just really nice boxes, really nice packaging that was clean. And you knew, okay, this was the legit. They were very good at communicating their values of regenerative agriculture, the cleanliness of their ingredients, and then the value of putting clean products on your skin.
Yeah. They're very good at storytelling. They're not afraid to say, try it,
Yeah.
you know.
Yep. And always had really good samples and really good, their stuff smelled so good as well. If you were a first time founder, which I know you don't want to be, but let's pretend you are for now, and you started selling, let's say you're at the stage where you've been selling at a farmer's market for a while, you sell to friends and family, you're really good at making product, but you want to get into your first store. What would be the simplest, most low cost way to jump into your first account?
Go to your neighborhood market. Where do you shop every day where they know who you are? And say, I want you to give me a chance and get your products on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you have a connection with a store and you have an independent store that you love, that you support already too, I can tell you there's like going into a locally owned independent account that you do not shop at and asking them to do you a favor is really kind of rude. Um, but if you shop regularly at a place and they know you and you support the kind of accounts that your product should be in, ask to talk to the buyer, ask to talk to the manager, tell them who you are and why it would benefit you for them to give you a chance. And that's all you want. You're not asking for them to make a big investment or anything like that. I don't ever support giving products on consignment, or like just a straight up free fill. But if that's something that you can do, then that's fine. But most stores are operating at a place where they can buy a small order from you to get started, and say that you want to test your product's ability to sell. You can potentially guarantee sales for that one account and say, just give me a chance. Let me do a demo and just ask.
I love that. I love that. And I remember bringing in a few brands that I didn't have any reps, and they just handed us a bag of samples and said, we really love your stuff. Here's some samples. Here's our line sheet in a like little bag. And I said, cool, thank you. I'll just put it on my desk, like all the other products I have on my desk, which are a lot of
Yeah.
samples. And the reason why we bought them or brought them in was because they were really good products. Number one, they were unique and they were in a category that was selling really well. So we were looking to expand that category. I remember when CBD was the biggest thing. And so we had to have a lot of different CBD products because there were CBD for joints, CBD for pain, CBD for pets, CBD for internal, CBD external. And so it was an easy category to sell. And then CBD stopped selling. And so we had to shrink it again. But it's like trending, whatever's trending too is a lot easier to test
Yeah.
in a market. Or when, if you're lucky enough to get a store that is trying to phase out one of the products that aren't selling really well, they do want to fill it with something new. So customers have something new to look at and something interesting to look at. And ideally with really interesting packaging. So then
Hmm.
it's easy to say, look at our new brand. We want to bring in new brands every quarter, at least at minimum. So customers don't get bored when they
Yeah.
shop with us regularly.
And the people who work in your local independent natural food stores, even like chains, really, like buyers, that's a bigger job than just being a cashier in a grocery store. And they often spent, especially like the people who worked in Laura's store, these were people who were like, there was like herbalists or specialists in certain things like mushrooms and probiotics and crystals, and people who really valued knowing about what they were responsible for. And so just even starting to develop a relationship with your local grocery store workers and the people who work in the department that you're trying to sell products in, prior to coming in and asking them to give you a chance, ask them if they'll take a look at your brand. Like, what do you, can you give me feedback on this? Like, where would this go in your store? And most of them, as long as they're not dealing with crazy things at that time, like all the people that I know who work in these departments would actually really value that conversation and would really give feedback because they really care about products and selection and what's available and founders and who sells products and things like that.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I had one full-time buyer and then a couple part-time buyers that were also cashiers, but everyone was trained really well and were either clinical herbalists or folk herbalists. So they were stoked when they got free product because they brought it home. They got to test it. They got to like play with it. And any samples of product that you can give for just, hey, I would love to sell this here someday, but I'm just seeing if you like it so far to get you some feedback. People will definitely take your product and keep you posted unless, like you said, they're in the middle of a crazy buy or right before the holidays or whatever it is. Knowing the seasonality of the store and knowing slow days that they're there just taking inventory, and not just, but taking inventory on slow days, like on a morning on a Wednesday might be the time that you go and hang out with them while they're kind of relaxing in their day versus right before the end of the day when they have to finish all of their tasks.
Right.
There's absolutely, timing is really essential.
Yeah.
Great. I am so excited to get some questions from our people. Shayna, you and I could talk so much about how to do this and distribution. Oh, actually, before we get questions, can you explain the concept of distribution?
Okay. So it's something that we hear a lot, and the politics around it have shifted quite a bit in our industry, and they constantly do. There is currently like, oh, I don't want to say that word, but I was going to say a monopoly on distribution in our industry, which there pretty much is. There's two major distributors, KeHE and UNFI.
Mhm.
As they make deals with different national organizations, they fight for who's the biggest one. And what that means is that there's one company that has distribution centers throughout the country, maybe like 4 to 6, and they supply all of the stores in the region around the distribution center. And so you can get into a UNFI or a KeHE, but you might not get into all of their fulfillment centers. And so it's such an arduous process. It makes sense for Cadia pretzels, but it does not make sense for a lot of independent brands that don't have that kind of inventory, that don't have that kind of upfront capital. They charge incredible slotting fees. So not only do you pay just to get in, but you also have to give them and extend to them an ongoing margin, like an ongoing discount, so that they can then give volume discounts and then have different pricing for their retailers. Some retailers like Whole Foods require that your product's in distribution now. There are different smaller distributors like Lotus Light and different regional ones. My distribution was in the process of being approved for Sprouts and things like that, which I wasn't even sure I wanted to do. Um, so there are smaller regional ones that you can, if you really want to go to the Whole Foods level. There's a ton of conversations about this topic all over LinkedIn, where you hear founders going like, I thought I was living the dream and I got into 400 Whole Foods doors and I haven't seen a return in 3 years because I'm in distribution and I pay all the slotting fees and I want to get out and I can't. Then you can't get out of UNFI or you can't get out of KeHE. So it is a double-edged sword, and so it's much easier for a store. It is. It's easier for a store to carry your product if you're in distribution. It can also be easier for a store to carry your product if you have really great sales representation and you have sales professionals in the area that know how to work with those stores. Yes, that excludes you from a Whole Foods. Um, but there are so many other accounts besides that, at the stage that most beginning founders are, like, it's not necessary to have a huge presence in retail and to go into the stores that require that. So distribution is got its benefits in that it makes it easier. You're exposed to more doors, but you lose a lot of the control and the oversight of your products and who your customers are too. Like they often won't tell you what stores they're selling to. So you lose a lot of that closeness to your brand, to your representation, to your customers, how your products are handled once they're in distribution. So it's a tricky game.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting journey because we bought from multiple distributors, Lotus Light, Threshold, UNFI. We never bought from KeHE, which I know if you wanted to get an Erewhon, Erewhon only buys through KeHE. Whole Foods only buys through UNFI. These are large distribution centers that buy, pallets and pallets of your product and then sell it to all the stores, and they're the ones who ship it for you. So in theory, it's like the Amazon, I guess, of natural food stores. Now the Whole Foods bought by Amazon, it's now like all in one
Yeah.
basket.
Literally the Amazon.
But I think this idea of local economics, really looking at what is the best margin on your return, the best use of your time, the best connection to your product, distribution might be a good option for you in the future, but right now, where a lot of people are at, probably much too early to decide that, and maybe never a good idea based on what you were just sharing, unless you have a huge margin and you're able to lose quite a bit of money in that process and still make money at the end of the day, which is really based on your category of product and if your product is able to have a higher price point on that shelf.
It's usually the step you take after like a round of VC funding, like when you're like, okay, well, we're successful, we're proven, we're ready to go to Whole Foods. Now let's get a VC in and get funders and get funding and investors, and that's when you'll make a deal with distribution.
Yes. And if you're ever in that point, you have to also have an exit plan, which is you are prepared to sell to a larger company. That's the only reason why you get VC funding in the first place, is that you have to be comfortable with selling to a company like Nestle or Clorox, which owns a lot of the natural products at this point. And if you don't ever want to do that, then that's not a journey you should ever go down. But just to put that out there, when it comes to VC funding, they'll tell you what to do at some point when it unless you want to go on the stock market.